Okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the CVSD Town Hall, Budget Town Hall. Um, as you may know, we've been having a town hall each month. On the odd months, we have our diversity, equity, and inclusion town hall meetings. And then on our even months, we have our strategic plan and budget meetings. So thank you so much for coming to our February meeting. Today, there are three of us who will be hosting a presentation and kind of giving you an update on where we are in our budget process. So I'd like for Gary and Megan to introduce themselves.
Yeah, I'm Gary Marcus. I'm the Chief Operations Officer for the district.
I'm Megan Metzler. I'm the Vice Chair of the CVSD School Board and the Chair of the CVSD Finance Committee.
Thank you all. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Renee Sanchez, and I am the CVSD Superintendent. So I'm going to go ahead and our goal today is to go fairly quickly through our presentation so that we have lots of time for questions at the end. So I'm going to go ahead and begin sharing my screen, and that way we can begin the presentation.
I think there are several people unmuted. If you could mute, please, that'd be helpful.
Okay. All right, let's go ahead and begin. There you go. So like we say every year, it's really important for us to draw up a budget through a process so that way we try to support our CVSD mission and vision. We try to follow the guidance from the Vermont Agency of Education by meeting or exceeding educational quality standards. We always have things in this case in the last couple of years, we've been really trying to support academic growth and belonging. So we want to make sure that we implement key initiatives. And then we also want to make sure that we're checking our own work to implement and continue to improve the budget process. And then make sure that we're listening to both our community members from inside our schools and from the community members as well. And then, of course, a very key component is at a cost that the community can support or will support. This gives you an idea of that we are always doing budget work. As soon as we pass a budget, we start working on the next one. And so we're in the bottom left-hand part of the slide at this point, where we are getting close to town meeting day and close to the voting. So we're trying to make sure that we're getting out the communication as much as possible. Once the budget is accepted, then this summer, we will make sure that we start looking at a needs assessment so that we can start developing the goals for next year, whether it's part of the budget itself or it's academic. Then after the summer, we have to make sure with our fourth quarter review and our prior year audit that we're providing services for the school district.
Can't remember the name of that. Yeah.
All right, sorry about that.
Oh, jeez.
I'm not actually giving you a full hug either.
I'm sorry.
Angela, you're not on mute. Angela, you need to mute.
Sorry.
In the fall is when we start getting information from our campuses, getting information from our community, so that way we can make sure that we are designing the budget with input from our constituents. And then as we roll into December and January, we're making sure that we're presenting a budget to the board that will be deemed acceptable to share with the voters. This particular year is kind of an intersection, or we call it a convergence of a lot of things that are happening at the same time. So our COVID relief funds that we have been utilizing from the federal government cease this year. They will come to a conclusion in September 2024. And so within those services, we'll tell you more about them later, but those services, even though the money is going away, the services are still needed. So we'll talk more about that later. The other thing that came to fruition this year is was an equity and student funding act called Act 127, and it was I guess passed in 2022. And it was the first year was going to be this year as we're developing our fiscal year 25 budget. And as we will talk more about that shortly. And the goal, of course, of this particular act was to make sure that students around Vermont received an equitable education. It doesn't matter where they were going to school. And then finally, like everything else that's going on, not only in Vermont, but in the rest of the country, there are rising costs for both salaries, for healthcare, property values, and even just logistics of getting items in from other parts of the country and other parts of the world to make sure that our facilities are up to date. Gary, would you like to start here, or I can keep going?
Yeah, no, that's fine. So this is kind of a summary of the components of the budget, what's in the budget. To maintain the current level of programming that we have, all the known increases, contractual agreements with employees, healthcare, general inflationary costs, to do everything that we did in 2024 and 2025. It came out to a 6.7% increase. So that is kind of the level service budget is what we like to term it. The board and the administration together decided that the federally funded ESSER supports were pretty critical to address ongoing student need in a whole bunch of areas that are listed in the middle. So there's $1.7 million in those support costs that were included in the general fund budget. On top of that, there are some critical needs from a facility standpoint, namely really environmental conditions, making our learning environments acceptable and palatable. We have kind of two major projects that weren't included in the 2022 bond that we thought were extremely important for the environments in classrooms in both Williston Central and Heinsberg community schools. And we did add that based on the law that's still in place, the Act 127 and the 5% cap allowed us to do that without increasing taxes under the tax rates under the current law, and saving that future debt service that our community members would not have to pay for. So all those ones in the middle, the behavioral supports, they are student-facing positions. Everything listed in there in the center. Okay, Renee, thank you. Questions have come up about, is anything getting cut from the budget? Yes. The answer is yes. So we carefully examine every year through the exact same process, class sizes, projected enrollment, and adjust as we need to support the range that the board has established for class sizes across all 5 of our schools. So this year, because of some enrollment-based changes, overall about 100 fewer students, which we have expected based on the demographic analysis that we most recently updated in 2022. We had expected a small dip in fiscal years 24 and 25, and then the projections have us gaining students again for the next several years, but we are about 100 students short. So this budget is reduced by a total of 5 budgeted teaching positions and 4 historically unfilled paraprofessional positions to maintain the school board's recommended class sizes. So year-to-year review, In FY24, we had a $96,119,804 dollar budget. It came out to that level service budget when we added all the things that we are required to keep the same level of services. It came out to about $5. I guess that's the actual number. And then retaining the formerly federally funded supports was 1.7 million. And the facilities critical work was 1.5 million for a budget of 105,801,185. This is our budget allocation. It's just a pie chart that breaks down the percentages of the total budget into its pieces. Pretty self-explanatory. We can take a look at that. It's important to note that both district and campus admin, they include more than just salaries and benefits. It's all costs associated with the administration of our district. These are a partial list of the potential facilities improvement projects that would be covered with the $1.5 million. And you can see that HCS has HVAC and electrical that are both critical. The controls at Williston are from the 20-year ago project have pretty much completely failed, and it's almost impossible to control the temperature in that building is the experience we've been having. Those are key two key pieces of those critically important access, safety, and climate initiatives. And it's important to note that none of that work is included in the bond that we are putting in front of the voters for consideration to finish projects that were originally funded in the 2022 bond. Property tax increases. So again, I think we were pretty transparent that we didn't know the exact impact of H-850. If it becomes law, that law changes the former 5% capped transition mechanism to a cent-based transition mechanism over 5 years that is initially based on the amount of tax capacity that districts lost from the change in pupil weights that was contained in Act 127. So there are things that we can't know because it's based on every school budget in Vermont. We will not know the yield prior to voting. The yield is likely at its floor right now, which the floor translates into the highest tax rate possible with all the current information that the AOE has collected so far. It is likely that it can't go anywhere but up from here. And for, every dollar rate goes up, lowers the tax rate, for the pre-CLA tax rate for all towns in Vermont. So CVSD is made up of 5 towns. We know that our estimated range is 19 to 26%. We, again, think 26% is on average is as high as the increase could be. And we have a fairly good analysis process that says that it will be lower than 26%, but we can't know until the legislature approves the final yield. Capital improvement bond, these are all life safety and accessibility projects that were approved in March of 2022. Timing was really unfortunate. There's been historic escalation in construction costs, and it's just put the possibility of completing these projects out of reach with the funding that we requested in 2022. This bond will let us actually finish all the life safety projects that were approved in 2022: fire alarms, fire suppression, sprinkler system, electrical, HVAC, and other safety requirements that were contained in the 22 bond. The next slide will show kind of an explanation. This is the original budget, what we have spent so far. When we repriced all of these for actual scheduling, the new budget column is what came back from all the requests for proposals that we had, and the best costs that we could get are highlighted in the new budget column, which leaves us about 3.425 million short to be able to complete those. We recommended a 7% contingency and later decided to take some contingency risk and ask for a bond of $3.5 million to complete these projects. We do have some available fund balance. If that contingency risk doesn't work out, we could fund a small amount of contingency through the fund balance if the board approved that. And these are the articles that are on the ballot right now. Article 7 is the budget. You will see the top line number in Article 7. Article 8 is our life cycle replacement for school buses, where we take short-term notes instead of bonds to life cycle replace the buses that are aging and getting unserviceable. Article 9 is the fund balance to apply any fund balance from the 25 budget to, or any fund balance to future budgets. And those have been critical in our strategy to deal with the loss of weights that we have. We give the board the option to apply some fund balance in future years to help soften the tax increases in the future. And Article 10 is the capital bond, the $3.5 million that we're requesting to finish the 2022 projects. Important to note that, over 60% of Vermonters pay property tax based on their income rather than the assessed value of their homes. If household income, that's complete household income from everyone in the household, is less than $128,000 in adjusted gross income, people would qualify to pay based on their income instead of their property value. And you have to apply for the credit when you file your taxes. And this is, for more information and a really good explanation, the website for the tax department is listed here. And then Monday, March 4th is the annual meeting, and the Australian ballot will be on the 5th. So that kind of concludes our presentation for tonight. I know we went through it relatively quickly, but we wanted to make sure we saved a lot of time to address individual concerns and questions.
And we'd really love for you to join us at the annual meeting. It will be in person at CVU on Monday, March 4th at 5 p.m. So hope to see you there. And don't forget to vote. And then if you think of a question after our presentation or after this Zoom meeting, please do not hesitate to go to the website and visit our webpage dedicated to the budget. Feel free to email the school board at that email address, or you're welcome to use the Let's Talk function on our website. You could also email Gary and myself. Okay. That's the last slide. So I guess at this point, we are, Megan, is there anything you'd like to add before we start taking questions?
No, I was about to say no, but then I was going to talk. So yeah, I guess I'll just add that I think it's important that I think it's important for everyone, when I know, and I feel the same way as well, when you hear the proposed tax rate increase, the assumption is to think that the school is also, or that the board has also suggested that we increase our funding significantly, or that we are adding extra resources that we don't think are critical. And to just reiterate what Gary said, this is a level funded budget. It provides the same exact programming as last year or the current year that we're in right now. So it's a level funded budget. We're not creating new programming or any other items. And then it does focus on things that are part of the strategic plan and what we're focused on overall as a board and as a community, and that we received a lot of critical feedback on as we went through this budget process. So there are 17 and a half positions related to previously ESSER funded positions that support social emotional health, and those are really important factors. And I've seen firsthand how important those roles are in our schools, and we think that those are really important for our students. In addition to that, we also have the extra facilities work, which also goes to support the learning environment and making sure that kids are in classrooms that are at a temperature where they can learn and they can focus the best that they can. All those together lead to an amount that is much less than I think it's a 9% increase versus last year. That's given inflation, non-contractual arrangements that we have with our teachers and other items. And then the real change and the rest of it is a result of the educational financing system in Vermont and the impact of Act 127 on our district. We've spent a lot of time as a board thinking about this. It's been an area of focus for us ever since Act 127 passed. We take it very seriously, and we've really focused on it. And this is where we've landed after a lot of very deep thought and consideration for the overall community. And that's where we are today.
Thank you, Megan. We have 2 questions so far in the chat, and so I'll go ahead and read them aloud for our panelists and for everybody else to hear. So how did our pupil weight change? Did it cause us to lose or gain state funding shares?
I'll take that one since Gary didn't go off mute. Overall, Champlain Valley School District is disadvantaged by the pupil weights. If you look at our process overall, if you look at our pupil weights last year versus this year, we lose approximately 17% pupil weights overall. If you just ignore everything else, if you take the same exact number of pupils prior to Act 127 and after Act 127, CVSD is disadvantaged by Act 127, and we lose approximately 17% of our pupil weights overall. And people will say, what does that mean? What counts as a pupil versus what are the weights? The weights fall into a bunch of different categories, but these were also not set by the school district. The school district has no control over that. It was determined by the legislature and agreed to by the legislature in Act 127 2 years ago. And what it does is it looks at all the types of students that come to a school, and they say, you know what, students who are English language learners or who live in poverty or are in very rural districts, they cost more money to educate than students who do not fit some of those characteristics. And if you look at the population and the demographic makeup of CVSD versus other school districts throughout the state, we have fewer students proportionally than other school districts throughout the state. So as a result, we lose pupil weights overall. It's really confusing. They don't make it easy for us to explain, but put as bluntly as you can, we are disadvantaged by Act 127, and we are considered to have fewer weights than a school that has a different demographic than us. I don't know if you'd say it differently, Gary.
No, I think that's accurate. 17% loss in tax capacity kind of simply means that to have the same budget with the new weights as we did in FY24, we would have to raise 17% more in property in taxes for the district as a whole. I think I can answer the other part of the question, and this is from memory because I can't get to it right now while I'm on the meeting. But our share of the statewide population prior to the change in weights was 4.61, I think, if I remember right. And now, post the change in weights, it's 4.01% of the total student population of Vermont.
Thank you all. Next question is, what is the school board doing to advocate for the district with the legislature? If this legislation passes, we are asking our taxpayers to foot a significant increased bill without our children seeing the benefits, since we are proposing a level funded budget. So I'll start, Megan, and then you can take over. So the school board is actively advocating with the legislature, as are the representatives of the district. They've been able, we've been communicating with them in order to share our side of the story and to make sure that they understand that our taxpayers and our employees and others are going to be hit by significant impact, thanks to what was originally Act 127, but is now potentially Act 850. So Megan, I know you've been writing individual legislators and others in the state government. So if you could share a little bit about that.
Yeah, thank you, Renee. So the school board has, I guess I'll speak for myself rather than the board. The school board does include a legislator who is well aware of the issues that we're facing, and she provided. I won't speak. She's online. She can discuss that as well. But so she understands what we are going through, and she clearly shares that with the legislators, with the legislator overall. I personally have been advocating with every CVSD legislator. I've reached out to the I've reached out to the House and Means Committee of the legislature of the House. I've reached out to the Education Committee of the House. I've reached out to the Senate Finance Committee of the House and explained, as they were going through this process and coming up with H 850, the specific impact that this would have on our overall district. I've invited them to school board meetings, and I've invited them to Finance Committee meetings as well. So I can assure you we are communicating with our legislature and doing the best to make sure that they understand the impact this has on our district.
Okay, thank you, Megan. The next one is, how can you agree to a contract with the NEA? Oh, okay. How can you agree to a contract with the NEA before the spending is voter approved, especially healthcare policies? So we negotiate with the NEA as the agreement is coming to an end. This past year, we agreed to a 3-year contract with our educators and our support staff. And so we'll agree to those because we have a pretty good idea. It actually helps us budget when we know exactly how much salaries are going up. With respect to the healthcare policies, the NEA, the Vermont NEA, and the Vermont School Boards Association are the ones who negotiate that for educators, and so that's just a number that we receive and have to live with when we get it. The next is, how much are teachers contributing to their health care cost as they have ballooned, and how much is the district paying out for those who opt out of health care? I don't have that amount right off the top of my head. Gary, I don't know if you're back yet. If not, we can come back to it.
Yeah, it's a 20% contribution from the employee under the statewide agreement. And cash in lieu, I'll have to look up in the contract for teachers. I think that it's $1,500, but I'm not sure.
I think that's correct, Gary. I think that's correct. Okay. The next one. During the overview, I have heard reference to a level service budget and also to a level funded budget. My understanding is that a level funding budget means the same amount of money from year to year, whereas a level service budget allows the same services to continue from year to year, even though the cost of those services and therefore the proposed budget increases for the reasons that have been mentioned in the overview. Which do we have proposed for fiscal year 25, level funded or level service? Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah, so the assessment is 100% correct of the explanation of both level funded and level service. We really have neither. Our basis to build this budget was on a level service principle, on the level service principle. That number, as I explained in the slide presentation, was about 102 million, 102.5 million, a little more than that. Like we decided that the formerly federally funded support, sorry, that was hard to say, were critical to the needs of students. And we determined that the facilities stuff that was not bonded, the projects that were not bonded but critical, would be included on top of that level service budget. Now, when we made that decision, the legislation, that the law that was in place allowed us to do that without any increase to our tax rate. This was a strategy that was built over 2 years. And at the time, it didn't impact tax rates at all. If H 850 does pass, it does have potentially up to a 9-cent increase. No, I'm sorry, 6-cent increase to the tax rate, the amount above the level service budget. Now we think that may go down depending on what happens with the yield, that impact. But that's the 100% straightforward explanation.
Thank you, Gary. Next question. I am thinking of voting no to send a message to the legislature that the school funding mechanism is broken. Explain why this is or isn't a good idea.
Want me to try that one first?
Yeah, we can all try it if need be.
I would say, yeah, I think everybody should try it. Like I personally believe through conversations with Angela and other legislators that they have the message already. I think they totally understand that this system is unsustainable. I believe that the intent of the legislature is to really examine the important parts that are still in Act 127 that requires state level government to look at and compare and contrast different education funding systems. I think that will happen. I don't know if I'm confident that in FY25 we'll have significant change, but I think it's possible. But I don't think that I think the legislature is there. They have the message. This has been a really difficult process for them with a really well-intended law to start with a bunch of unintended consequences that were found out pretty late in the game. And my view is that they get it. And this has been pretty tough on them as well. They are also our taxpayers in our district. They're feeling the same thing that we all are. And I think they're there.
I can share why it isn't a good idea. And I don't even know if it's really not a good idea. My argument would be like this budget, we went through the traditional budget process that we go through every year, and we calculated our budget based on the previous Act 127 language. And by adding the ESSER positions and the maintenance or the facilities money to the budget, these are all things that are needed. And so by including those, these are all things that we're doing right now on our campuses. The ESSER funded positions are on our campuses right now. They may not necessarily be part of the $96 million budget, but they are there. And so our goal is to make sure that we have the budget that the community expects. with the services that we provide on our campuses. And so that is what we are putting in front of the voters. That again being said, that particular budget in this system is causing a higher tax rate. And so that's really what we're asking the voters to weigh is the tax rate and the expected level of services that we provide.
I can chime in if you want. Trying to find a quieter space. Sorry. I can say with confidence that the legislature, I mean, if I am open, it's okay to speak as a legislator to answer this particular question. There is no doubt very clear and like wide awareness that the education funding system in Vermont is completely outdated. It doesn't work for our state anymore, and there's a strong will to update it. So as Gary said, you know, whether that can be accomplished this session to really impact our budgeting for next year remains to be seen. But there are already a lot of people working to figure this out. So, you know, I think a better way perhaps to interact with legislators on this issue is to reach out to them rather than trying. Of course, your voice, your vote is your voice. You know, of course, do as you see fit. But sending a message directly to legislators about your awareness of the brokenness of this system and how it's ineffective, that would be a stronger way to communicate your thoughts and more effective, I think.
Okay, thank you, Angela. This is kind of a callback to a previous question, Gary. So when you were saying that it was $1,500 for the payout, is that $1,500 per paycheck or just a one-time $1,500?
One time, and I haven't been able to call up the contract yet to verify that number.
Okay, but it's a one-time payment. It's not a recurring payment.
It is spread over each paycheck, but the total is the total. It's not per paycheck.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next question. If the budget was level funded or was funded with an increase more in line with the CVSD town budget increases of roughly 5%, how drastic would the cuts to schools be?
Okay, top of my head, if you give me a few minutes, I can do some math on that, but they would be pretty significant.
Yeah, I did some math last night, Gary, just going to like keeping around the 95, 96 million dollar budget, that was still 10 or 11%. So we would have to cut more than 90, cut back to probably closer to 90 or even below that to get it down to 5%.
Muted. So if you're talking like 10 to 12 million dollars, you're talking 100 to 120 professional level positions.
Okay. Okay. Next one.
And to that point, 100 to 120 professional level positions means significantly changing the way and the principles that we educate our students. And it goes against a lot of the things that we've been hearing about and the feedback that we've received as a district about what's important to us as a district.
Okay. Thank you, Megan. Why did you decide not to take the time to rethink the budget and push back the vote? And what exactly are the ESSER positions?
The ESSER positions, the two of our administrators gave a great example of our ESSER positions last night, but those are positions that include academic interventionists, people that can go in and pull students in and out of the classroom to help them work on specific issues that they're working on. It includes school counselors who can help students with the social emotional needs that they have overall as a that they deal with overall. And both of those things have proven to be very important to us as we come out of COVID and we continue to work through and really realize the overall impacts that are just the needs that are within our broader community as we continue to go through that. The board chose to continue with this budget last night for several reasons. One, to the point that Renee made earlier, it reflects the process that we went through, the needs of our districts and the needs of our students, and the process that we've gone through overall and where we thought what we think is important to us. We also considered, if we were to take the time to do it and we were to rewarn the budget, we would have to make those decisions right now in order to warn that in time for we would probably have to do that in the next week or two in order to rewarn something within 30 days. So as we go through that time, we don't have any more information today beyond what we know today that would cause us to believe that the impact would be significantly different. And when I say that, I think Gary had some of those slides yesterday. We would still be looking at a close to 23% increase in taxes overall based on what we know today and the known things that we could cut or that we would kind of cut first. Is that around the right ballpark, Gary? 23-ish%. Okay, 23%. So the board needed to think about that overall and what our needs are as a district and what the impact would be. In addition, we think it's really important that, as Gary said earlier, this is a general election year, and we think it's important that we have the most people voting as possible. And this is a way for you to give us feedback and for us to hear that feedback. It's a really good opportunity for us to get feedback from the broader community overall. And finally, this is what we can control. There are many things that are outside of our control. As we sit here today, H-850 is still not the law. I know it got passed through the Senate. But I also know that when I hear about what Angela says and what I've been hearing as we've gone through this process, there are more steps that they're trying to take in order to address this overall. And we don't have any control over that from a CVSD perspective. So we're focused on what we can control. We're focused on our process that we went through and the needs that we know that we have, and we're thinking about more broadly just the needs of the district.
Thank you, Megan. Okay, so the next one is what
Renee,
is it?
can I interrupt you, Renee?
Sure, absolutely.
The cash in lieu in the teacher's contract is $700 for a single plan, $1,200 for a two-person, and $1,500 for a family.
Okay, and that's spread out over the number of paychecks that we have if they choose to do that option.
Correct.
Thank you. Next one. What is the total percentage? What is the total percentage of budget is the percentage of salary and benefits for administrators, faculty, and staff? And there's multiple questions in this one, so we'll take them kind of one at a time. So typically in a school budget, the salary and benefits for all of the employees can be anywhere from usually around from 70 to 80%. I don't know the exact percentage, but we fall into that category as well. Gary, is that accurate?
I don't know what you said. I was reading a text.
I was,
and I would love to clarify. Would love to clarify that my response about whether we should vote no to send a message to the legislature.
You just muted yourself again, Gary.
Okay, so I really do want to go on the record saying I don't think that we should vote down the budget to send a message to the legislature, because my point was I think they clearly have the message already.
Thank you, Gary.
Sorry, Rick.
And then back
No
to the
problem.
question, which was
Yeah,
percentage of.
And I said the percentage of the budget of salaries and benefits for pretty much everybody in the district, and it's usually between in a school district, it's usually between 70 and 80%. And I don't know the exact percent, but it's usually around that.
We rounded, I think it's 81.
Okay, 81. What is the increase if the 5% cap is not accepted?
This budget is the numbers we gave you today assume that the 5% cap has been lifted. If the 5% cap were to stay, the average increase for the district was still going to be approximately 18%. And the 5% cap was a mechanism of Act 127 that was put in place. And that we thought was in place as we went through this budgeting process overall. But the 5% cap stayed based on changes in property tax values and other factors. The overall increase would have been 18%, given these changes that are going through and the fact that they've changed Act 127 late in the game being February. That's closer to 26% overall.
Thank you. I listened to the past 7 meetings, and the ESSER fund, if the ESSER funds are essential, so essential, so can we eliminate other positions to allow these positions to remain? We believe that the positions that we have already in the budget that are not ESSER, were funded by ESSER, those are already essential. So many of our positions are student facing that it's really important for us to be able to provide the services and the programs that our constituents have expected in the past. And so given that that's the expectation, it's really hard to say that those positions are not essential as well.
And more importantly, this budget does reduce, if you look at the number of positions that are on our campuses today for FY24, this budget for FY25 does reduce the number of ESSER funded positions. We've reduced it by, I think, 5, Gary. So we had a process in place, and we had really a commitment to remove or kind of phase those positions out over the 5-year period that we were originally afforded under Act 127. So we are not keeping them all. We are going through a process right now of reviewing what do we need the most, and we are reducing those budgets versus the number of positions that are on our campuses today, doing really important work, really helping our students.
And I don't know if anybody said it, but many of the ESSER funded support positions are really providing a lot of support to the students that Act 127 is really Act 127 was looking to support. Multilingual learners, all of those kind of students are really a big part of the targeted support that was included with the federal funding.
The last question from this chat bubble is the para positions that have been eliminated because there has not been hires. Why eliminate when it seems like there are people needed to be student facing? How do we increase those positions? Gary, I think those positions have been difficult to fill for multiple years. And we, given that it is really hard to find paraprofessionals, although we are working we've done some good work to increase the salaries to hopefully lure more people back into our schools. And so that's our hope. That's the way that we're trying to increase more fulfillment of those positions. Okay, next question. Why wasn't any of this year's surplus applied to the budget to help reduce the huge tax rate increase? And if all the other large school districts follow our example and make no reductions in their budgets, won't the yield stay worst case and our increase be at least 26%?
Theoretically, yes. I don't know if I would say at least 26%. I think, like I explained before, that the data that the AOE has based the yield on right now, it is probably worst case data. If every district did not change their budget, the yield would stay static, theoretically. There are other levers that the legislature could pull to reduce the yield. Has not been an uncommon practice in the past to use other revenues, state level revenue sources, to buy down tax rates statewide. I don't know if the legislature has those options this year, but they have in the past. We do know that some districts are going to rewarn. We do have anecdotal evidence that I'm not going to name any districts, but districts who put many millions of dollars into deferred maintenance are reconsidering that because of the change in the law.
And as for fund balance, we did not include fund balance in our originally warned budget because under Act 127, there was it would not have helped CVSD taxpayers to apply that fund balance to the currently warned budget. It's a factor that we considered, and it's one of the levers that we have to pull if we do need to rewarn a budget overall. But the board decided when we went through our originally warned budget to not include it because it would not have been prudent for CVSD taxpayers to have included that during an Act 120 under the Act 127 principles and provisions that they had, because there was a cap on how high our tax rate could have gone.
Next question. We're hearing that a significant component of increased spending is for social emotional support. Why has this need ballooned, and what non-school options are being examined to lift this burden from taxpayers? So I can take kind of the first part of the question. So one of the things that we keep hearing from schools and from families and from teachers is just the increased needs that students are having in the classroom and on the playground and around the schools, even on the bus. And so what we're doing with our social emotional learning personnel is we want to make sure that we're providing support to the teachers, support to the counselors and from the counselors in helping students with their everyday needs, but also working with them to develop their executive functioning skills and their ability to make good decisions on a regular basis. And so given that our teachers are working on kind of the initial work, they've taken on the initial first steps with students. But really what is happening is that many services that the state is usually responsible for have been given to schools. So things, think back to COVID when we were responsible for public health. And then now we are having to serve a lot of students with the difficulties that they may have on a daily basis. And so it's essential for us to be able to have personnel like that on the campus in order to serve the students. And then non-school options that are being examined to lift this burden from the taxpayers. There are not very many options. Many of the options that are in Vermont are already fully taxed, not just by our school district, but by other school districts. And so we are definitely open to listening to the community as to what options may be available, so that way we can make sure that we're using our money wisely and serving our students more often.
Renee, can I just add to that?
Sure.
One of our big challenges as a state right now, and school districts really bear the brunt of this challenge, obviously, is that the Agency of Education right now is really struggling. It's underfunded, under-resourced in terms of people. And so a lot of the leadership, there's a leadership vacuum really when it comes to education at the state level. And so these sorts of problem solving, this kind of problem solving, what can we do to look outside of schools to provide these social services, things like that, that really should be done at the state level, and it's not being done right now. So school districts are left to pick up that slack. And we open our doors to every student who wants to enter. We receive our students just as they are, and then we need to meet them where they are and meet their needs. So it's a huge, I would say, responsibility and privilege that schools take up every single day, without a ton of leadership at the state level.
Thank you, Angela. Next question. Is it accurate that the total budget is up 10.7% from last year, including ESSER and one-time spending?
Yes, that's close.
Next question. If this does not pass an initial vote, what is the plan to revise through for the next vote? At what point would schools stop running if votes are not in favor of this budget?
I can address the first part. That's really a board decision where we go if we get a failed vote. I would imagine that they would work with the administration very closely to develop a strategy for a second vote. It would likely be some reduction. I don't know how much, but that really is a board decision. The second part of the question, like we would never cease to operate. We could cease to operate in any way that resembles the way we operate right now. But what happens if we don't have a failed vote by July 1st of 2024 is that
Past vote, if we don't have a past vote.
if we don't have a passed budget by July 1st of 2024, we have the statutory authority to borrow 87% of the $96.1 million budget that we have in FY24 to continue operation. So we could continue to operate, but we must pass a budget at some point during the fiscal year of 2025, July 1st, 2024 to June 30th, 2025, to continue to operate. I don't think, and the House Ways and Means testimony, I did hear testimony that said that had never happened to go all the way through the following fiscal year without an approved budget. So we would keep voting until we got an approved budget, and we would operate on 87% of the prior year budget.
And to your point, Gary, 87% of this year's budget would be to your point, we would not be providing education to our students the way that we provide it right now.
Nowhere close.
Let's see. What would the impact be on the anticipated tax increase if the fund balance was applied to fiscal year 25? The fund balance grew significantly last year. Why is it not obvious to use it this year to mitigate the tax increase?
The goal of the fund, so the fund balance is approximately $3.5 million, right, Gary? It's around $3.5 million.
3.2.
$3.2 million. So as a board, we've always generally tried to keep that at around $1 million, or we've always kind of wanted to maintain. It's been working practice to keep that at around $1 million overall, but it's never been our practice to just apply all $2 million or $2.2 million there overall that we know that we need to do it. So we want to leave some level of cushion. And I think around a penny of the tax rate is around $500,000 or so. So that would save us around 4 cents. I don't know that would get us to a much significantly lower tax rate overall. But it's something that that's an option. It is an option if we have to rewarn our budget at some point.
Thank you. I appreciate the income sensitive credit program is being advertised. Please note that it also applies to renters. Please also explain the 1 year lag and that it won't help this year with a huge increase.
I'll let Gary explain the 1 year lag.
So the 1 year lag, like I've had a little trouble getting my mind around this because there's always been a 1 year lag in income. Property tax credit now is the appropriate term, not income sensitized. There used to be a rebate when the program first started. Now it is a property tax credit where your property value is decreased along with your tax bill. I don't know how it applies to renters. Like I'd have to go back and look at the law. There's a separate renter rebate program in Vermont. I think that's a part of that's separate from property taxes. So you kind of got me on that it applies to renters.
Okay, next one. Even if nothing else changes, our protection under H850 decreases 20% every year. So whatever we decide this year, we will set a base for those future increases, and it gets worse every year. Why aren't we doing everything we can to cut now and prepare ourselves for the annual increase?
The reduction of 17 cents goes down 20 cents, sorry, 20%, approximately 2 cents each year for 5 years, 2.5 cents, whatever the number is. And that's something that we've been talking, Gary and I have always been talking about go forward about what our strategy should be to continue to I don't know, I'm not gonna use the word level fund or level service, but that's something that to be very clear, the board knew that we are going to have we've been using the term cliff, and we thought we had 5 years before we were going to hit that cliff. It's not really a cliff, it's really a mountain because you don't fall off of it, you have to climb up it. But we've known that for 5 years, and that's what we've been planning to try and address through our strategy over the past 2 years. It is not lost on me that we are going to have to make really hard decisions about our budget going forward and continue to make hard decisions about our budget and what that looks like. A big part of that is in line with the strategic plan that we've set and making sure that our strategic plan is reflective of really making sure that we continue to find ways to be as efficient and effective as possible. I understand that perspective, and we fully appreciate as a board that the 17 cents will become, I think it's 15 cents next year, maybe 14 and a half cents next year, 14 cents next year. But that's something that we know, and we will continue to add it. We know that, and I think we're going to have to continue to really look at everything that we do as a board. And that's I'm also on the finance committee. I think that's the next thing that's on our plate. And we thought we had 5 years to figure that out, and it's really hitting us now.
We've also built into the ESSER positions a gradual, I guess, reduction over each year over the next 5 years as well. So those positions plus other positions that are part of the budget will have to be looked at very closely. But the ESSER positions already have a plan to be reduced and eliminated over 5 years.
And that we will have to accelerate some of that.
Right. Okay. Next one. We had intervention positions before COVID, right? Could maybe be said that we added more post-COVID. I think it makes it more clear that intervention has always been part of our school systems. Just curious for clarity purpose. That is absolutely correct. We've had intervention positions and coach positions and coordinator positions within our schools. And yes, we added more because that was actually a very large focus point for both the ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 allocations. We wanted to make sure that we had those positions available for our students to make sure that they were back on track once they came back from first remote learning and then hybrid learning. So yes, thank you for that clarification. Next one. With one of the highest per pupil spending in the country and a declining population and a middle of the pack test scores, how isn't it in our best interest to vote this down?
I think you're referring to statewide middle of the pack results. I think that's a statewide assessment overall. That those I think if when we talk about, we received questions like this last night, and I thought about it, and I struggle with the response to outcomes not being exactly where we want to be, to vote down a budget and take away resources that we would need in order to improve the outcomes of our students. I don't know how you get the outcomes that we're looking for with significantly less funding overall. Vermont is for many different reasons an expensive state to educate students. That's a statewide comment that I'm making overall. And I think, to the point that Angela made earlier, that there do need to be changes to the overall state education system, but that is not something that this school board or the district have the ability to change on our own.
Okay, let's see. It's been reported that school districts added $250 million in spending knowing the property tax cap was in place. Did the Champlain Valley School Board add money, or CVSD add money? How many years into the future do you expect double-digit tax increases to continue?
As we've said tonight, and we've said at other times, we included in our budget right now is $1.7 million for the ESSER positions that we had a plan to phase out over 5 years. That will likely have to be accelerated, and $1 million for facility needs for this year. So 2.5 million, less than 3% of our overall budget, was included under the overall 5% cap mechanism under Act 127. I do not believe that we could have double-digit tax increases for more than one. I do not believe that this can continue, and I think that that's a larger state issue overall, and that we need help. We need help from the overall state and things that are outside of our control. But I do not believe that you can have this happen more than once, personally.
Yeah. If I could just add really quick that the protection, the 5% cap was anticipated, I believe, by the legislature to address districts like CVSD, who lost 17% of their tax capacity. What the unforeseen thing was that districts that were also advantaged chose to take advantage of the 5% cap to increase their spending as well. The law was always intended to give us 5 years to react to a significant loss of capacity and the ability to fund our schools at the levels that we have been. So I think it's unlikely. The one benefit, I know Act 850 or H 850 hurts us as a district this year, but it does change the formula to a more linear reduction and incentive as we go forward, and it will be much clearer to both the board and the administration what needs to be done to avoid double-digit tax increases going forward. And I think the impact on the ed fund that was addressed in this question was unanticipated, and also was a huge impact on the ed fund, which is the cause of the double-digit increases statewide. And I think that's mostly a first-year problem for double-digit increases.
Okay, we will keep going till about 7:45, so we'll try to get as many questions in as possible in that amount of time. And we're really excited that you have joined us here tonight. Hopefully it's been informative. If not, please remember to, we're going to put our presentation up on the website later, so you can access the contact slides at the on the last slide, so that way you can reach out to either the school board or Let's Talk or Gary or myself. Okay. On track with, does Act 127 go away mean we feel the pain this year and we don't have to have it trickle out over 5 years as we pick up the 17% tax increase related to our student weighting. Gary, we were talking about that last night.
I think I just answered that. To
Okay.
be honest, it changes from a linear problem with the biggest impact or from a nonlinear system with the biggest impact in year one because of the impact on the ed fund to a gradual step down incentive that gives us the information we need to be able to avoid a double-digit increase going forward.
Thank you. Next question is, would only providing breakfast and lunch to students who need it help our budget? I think that's a state law that we can't avoid not doing. Is that correct?
Yes, but the answer is yes. The answer is that universal meals, the funding for universal meals, about $29 million for FY 25, is one of those external pressures on the ed fund that schools aren't directly responsible for. So the answer is yes.
We can't change
However
it.
much they would reduce universal meals, and I'm not saying I advocate for that. I don't know. It would have to be studied and impacted, but any reduction on the ed fund would lower statewide property taxes.
Next one. Is there an audit process that looks at the day-to-day operations of schools and how to improve how we serve our students?
Renee, I know you can answer that as well. Like we do that every day internally. There are external companies who provide that fee-based service to do efficiency studies, to consult professionally develop educators. We do some of that. Relatively expensive, and it's kind of part of our daily work to evaluate and assess the efficiency and the effectiveness of our programming.
One of the benefits of having an external efficiency study is that the consultants would come in and they're essentially indifferent because they don't know what's going on in the school district itself. So if it allows the people who have to make the decisions for the school district to have a roadmap of sorts on how to efficiently evaluate what's going on in the school district. So if cuts need to be made, then it gives them the opportunity to do that. If this budget does not pass,
we've not taken consultant money to do that at this point.
yeah, we have not put that into place at this time. If this budget does not pass, are you able to expand on how an elimination process for contracted educators will work, or what areas will be impacted? I'm not sure if this is public information, so please feel free to ignore if this is the case. So it's part of our contractual agreement of how we, with both our support staff and with our faculty, on how we would address that situation, and it'd be listed in the our collective bargaining agreement. And even before we have the opportunity to go there, we would have to have really strong and close negotiations with our representatives of the union to make sure that we're following the process that is within the bargaining agreement.
And I think we will do everything we can to focus on student outcomes and what positions are focus on student outcomes as best we can.
Let's see. All right, I think this will be the last question. I agree the state has made this very hard and must accept much of the blame, but there were also decisions about how to spend federal funding that we may think about differently now. And there are cuts that we can make. I would trust the board more if you could accept some responsibility for where we are and some responsibility for helping taxpayers at least a little bit. Just because taxes are going up 15 to 20% doesn't mean they have to go to 20 to 25%. Why have you given up trying to minimize the tax increase?
I think I explained the board's decision earlier this evening, but we hear you. We went through a process to determine if we wanted to continue with our warrant budget overall. And when we looked at what was in our budget, we think that there's nothing in there. We believe that it's needed, and nothing was in there that was frivolous or unnecessary. It's a decision that we made.
Yeah, I would agree to that, Megan, that the budget is the budget that we designed like we would normally do every year. And if there had been places and room for us to cut, we would have definitely done that the first time through. All right, it is now 7:45. Would really like to, again, thank everyone for joining us tonight. I think Bonnie will post this on the website tomorrow. So if you want to go back and capture a part of it, please feel free, or let others know that to visit our budget page on our website. And thank you again for coming.
Renee, can I say one thing?
Sure.
I'm going to take advantage of the audience here, because I feel really badly that last night we neglected to thank our outgoing board members. It was just a total oversight given the focus on the budget and everything. But Barbara Martin of Shelburne and Jocelyn Adams, Williston representative, are both they were at their last final board meeting of their term last night. And I just want to publicly thank them so much for their service to our district. They've both served, I believe, 2 terms. And I'm really apologize for the oversight last night, and just want to share my gratitude for them.
Any final words, Gary or Megan?
Thank you. I understand. I understand all the questions. I appreciate all the questions. I appreciate the focus on this. This is not an easy ask of us. It's I cannot tell you the amount of sleep that we have lost over it ourselves, trying to figure out what's best for our community, and we appreciate your support.
Yeah, I'd like to thank everybody for being here. The turnout is really, like, it's encouraging to be able to have this kind of dialogue.
Yeah, thank you for all the questions. Thank you to the 91 people. I think that was the highest number that I clocked, but we might have exceeded that. So have a great night, everyone, and don't forget to vote.